knowing of President Nixon's expressed desire to visit the People's Republic of China, Premier Zhou Enlai, on behalf of the government of the People's Republic of China, has extended an invitation to President Nixon to visit China.
In 1972, the 37th President of the United States, Richard Nixon, visited China for a brief period of 7 days from February 21 to February 28. And this incident right here is somehow related to Jack Ma's $48 billion fortune. But how? Look around you, and there's significant chance that at least one of those things were made in China. And that's because today the US and China has an open trade policy, but it wasn't always like this. So how did things change? Well, thanks to President Richard Nixon, who decided to visit China in 1972, because this is somewhat considered a huge breakthrough, because since 1949, the year of formation of People's Republic of China, China has kept itself isolated from the US. And it was the first time that China would open to the West, and the outside world got to see China after decades of isolation as well. Now, even though the US and China re-established diplomatic relations and signed a bilateral trade agreement only in 1979, it is mostly a credit to Richard Nixon's 1972 visit, which instigated this. Now, during his visit to China, President Nixon would visit the city of Hangzhou, where lived a young boy named Marythm, also known as Jack Ma today.
Hangzhou, we become a pen friends. Marythm is so difficult to pronounce. So she said, do you have an English name? I said, don't. So can you give me an English name? She said, okay. She said, my father called it Jack, my husband called Jack. What do you think about Jack? I said, good.
You would mostly recognize him as the founder of ALIBABA.com, an e-commerce B2B website. Today, Jack Ma has a net worth of $48 billion, but he wasn't always like this. Born in a poor family, Jack Ma was always interested in understanding the people from the West. Good for him, because ever since President Nixon visited Hangzhou, it had become a tourist spot since. So, curious to learn about the Western people, Jack Ma would give free tour guides to tourists in exchange for English lessons. And Ma wasn't particularly good in academics either. He failed twice before he could get admitted to college, where he graduated with Bachelor of Arts in English and worked for a few years as an English teacher for a mere $12 a month. Now, this is where his life would change forever. In 1995, Jack Ma went on a trip to the US, where he got introduced to the internet for the first time, and he immediately knew what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. Jack Ma believed that internet could change the way of business in China and how it has been functioning for the past decades, and he thought that it could wide open its boundaries. So, inspired by this, he started a company called China Yellow Pages in 1995, which was basically the Chinese version of Yellow Pages, listing the businesses around the town. But it wasn't much of a hit because the Chinese people were not ready for the e-commerce era yet. But Jack Ma was relentless. He went one step further and anticipated that the internet could expand business much beyond China. So in 1999, Jack Ma created an online business with 17 other friends, which connected businesses between China and the rest of the world. In technical terms, it's called the B2B model. Let's say I run a battery business in the United States, so I can buy mass quantities of battery from a Chinese manufacturer and sell it here in the US through the website. Now, the website was named ALIBABA.com after quite an interesting story.
I did have a lunch, and the waitress came. I asked her, do you know about Alibaba? She said, yes. I said, what is Alibaba? She said, open sesame. Good. So I went on the street, asked about 10, 20 people. They all know about Alibaba, 40 Thieves, and Open Sesame, and I think this is a good name. And start with A. Whatever you talk about, Alibaba is always top.
Now that the company was created, funding was a major problem. So Jack looked for investors, he went to the bank, venture capitalists, but there was no luck. That's when Ma came across Masayoshi Son, a Japanese investor, to whom he presented the idea of Alibaba.com. So how did it go?
The investments you made is considered by many people to be the most successful investment in the history of mankind. You invested roughly $20 million in Alibaba, And at the time it went public, it was worth roughly $90 billion.
With $20 million from Masayoshi Son and $2 million somehow from Goldman Sachs, Ma started his journey to disrupt the e-commerce business. Though revenue started coming in since 1999, still Alibaba was not profitable until 2002. Though Ma struggled during the initial 3 years, it was totally worth it, and just when he thought everything was going good, eBay came in the picture. You see, China was a big market. eBay wanted a part of it. So in 2002, eBay entered the Chinese market by investing $180 million in a Chinese version of eBay called EachNet. Now, Jack Ma had built the Alibaba empire by focusing totally on small and medium businesses. But that didn't mean that he wanted to lose the game in his own territory, the Chinese consumers. Because eBay was a C2C model, meaning targeting the consumers.
Very interested in China right now. It could be one of our biggest markets.
And Jack knew if eBay took over the Chinese consumers, then they would eventually come for the Chinese businesses as well, which would pose a threat to Alibaba. So in the same year, eBay came in. Jack Ma launched the website Taobao.com, a competitor of eBay, targeting the C2C base which eBay was trying to capture. Now that Jack was in the game, he wanted to do something that would give him an upper hand. So as a competitive measure, Jack Ma did something that eBay never even thought about.
Jack announced that Taobao would build a consumer marketplace customized for the China market and make it free for 3 years.
And Ma was right. The consumer base of Taobao slowly started increasing, and which meant eBay's EachNet was losing its own. By 2005, eBay was already dead and it was losing its customers in a plummeting phase. And to make things worse, Jack Ma did this.
Just as eBay released its earnings, we announced that we'd make Taobao free an additional 3 years and called on eBay to follow our move.
Yeah, and Alibaba had grown so big because one man was relentless with the vision of e-commerce to change business and create jobs. And as a reward to this years of hard work, in 2014 Alibaba launched its IPO in New York Stock Exchange, which made Jack Ma a billionaire. And on top of that, it gave Jack what he most wanted, to help the Chinese small businesses and create jobs. Because since the signing of the US-China trade agreement in 1979, the trade has rose from $2 billion in 1979 to $636 billion in 2017, of which Alibaba posted a revenue of $22 billion in the same year. I mean, it's not a big number, but Jack Ma's dream was fulfilled. And all this would not have been possible without President Nixon's quick initial steps, especially when the world was skeptical about China, at least in the context of time. Though President Nixon may have been an icon behind this historic trade agreement and even Jack Ma's wealth in a subtle way, I've got to say that Jack Ma is truly a rags to riches story. And he built all this from bottom up with his 17 friends. And in spite of repeated obstacles, continuous rejections, he made all this happen.
You lose only when you give up.
Consider subscribing if you like the video. See you guys in the next one.